Good day and welcome to this Typefi webinar on scripts and scripting. My name is Carroll and I'm one of Typefi's script writers. I've been with the company since 2010. Before joining Typefi, I worked as a freelance typesetter, copy editor and indexer for about 20 years and mainly for academic publishers. In the last 18 years I did all that work in InDesign and I've always used scripts to make life easier and work much more efficient. And I have to say, I always thought that script writing was good fun. The Typefi system was originally conceived as a scriptless automation system for composing InDesign documents. And in principle, the core system can produce very good-looking publications without any additional custom scripts. But the reality is that most jobs require some customization. For example, a recent quick roundup in the company revealed that we have only one customer who runs Typefi without any custom scripts. These custom scripts can be run at various points during a document's pagination, and these points are called script events, and that's the topic of today's episode. Scripting, therefore, is an essential part of InDesign when it's used to create documents. In fact, Adobe claimed in their CS6 scripting tutorial that scripting is the most powerful feature in InDesign. No other feature can save you as much time, trouble, and money as scripting. And I fully agree with that. I saw that when I worked as a typesetter, and it's true, of course, in Typefi workflows as well. This webinar is about the role and the content of scripts in Typefi workflows. Typefi's composition system, also called the engine, is a JavaScript itself. It's a very big and complex JavaScript, but it's a JavaScript nevertheless. And the webinar series will show you how you as a user can extend the engine's general functionality with custom functionality to tackle things that aren't covered by the engine. In this first episode, we're not yet going into writing scripts. Because custom scripts have to run at some events, you have to know the nature of these events before you can start writing scripts for Typefi workflows. And again, because we're not yet going into the details of script writing, this first part is useful also for people who operate Typefi and want some background on the script events and deploying scripts. So the real fireworks doesn't start until the next session. Let's now turn to the topic of this webinar, the script events. All custom InDesign scripts are designed to run at a specific event. Those events can be seen on the Script Events tab of the Create InDesign document and Create InDesign book actions. So let's have a look at one. Here on the right-hand side of the screen is the server interface. I'll go to book workflow. And here the event scripts, the script events on the event scripts tab, from book start to book end. In the document workflow, in the Create InDesign document workflow, you won't see the book start and book end events naturally. Book start is the first event. At book start, all you have is an empty book file. A script has access only to the book file's properties. If you were to stop a job right after the book starts event, then all you'd see on your screen is an empty book. This event is hardly ever used by anyone. We sometimes use it to run a so-called hot fix. If there's a problem in the engine, it doesn't happen very often, but if a customer reports a problem with the engine, then we can do a hot fix to fix that problem. And that's in book jobs, that hot fix would be run at book start. And naturally, in a document job, a single document job, you'd run that hotfix at document start. Second event, document start. Document start, the engine has opened a copy of the template and has prepared it for the job. All pages after the first page are removed, the first page is cleared, the document is saved using the name specified in the general tab. And also just checks are made and the document's measurements are set to points and the ruler is set to pages. and all these things are reset at when the job finishes. At document start, you can do things like activate certain layers. You can set a spot color, for example. You can change all selected paragraph styles. Now, in general, what you can do at document start, you can also do at document end. But at document start, that would be more efficient because the document is so much smaller. Section start. Section start we don't use. We've never used section start scripts, and that's also partly because the section here is more of an Typefi engine abstraction than something physical in the document. So we just don't do section start scripts. Spread start scripts we also hardly ever do. I checked in our archives, and we've done exactly one spread start script. The reason is that what you can do at spread start, you can also do at page start when the page is the left-hand page in a left-to-right workflow. So the spread start event isn't really necessary. We then go straight on to page start. At page start, the Typefi engine has added a new page to the document and has overridden all master elements onto that page. The main story on the page is threaded to the main story of the previous page, if there is a main story. And the same goes for TOC frames and index frames. They're threaded to the previous TOC frame or index frame. At page start, floats and fixed elements haven't yet been placed. And for scripts, at page start, what you usually want to do is things that you want to do before the engine starts placing elements on the page. For example, a table that breaks across pages, and if you want continuation notices, then you would place those at page start. At spill end, the engine has read a story from the CXML file and has formatted it and had placed it in the text frame. And story here means either a whole main story, but it can also be the content of an element, a caption. It can be anything that ends up in a text frame is a story. Floats are separate spills. If the story is a main story, it'll usually be overset. And because most of the story is overset at spill end scripts can't deal with anything that requires geometry, shall we say. So the spill end scripts can't use properties like baseline, geometric bounds, horizontal offset. If a script does have to appeal to geometric offsets and baseline, then you have to run it at page end when you can actually see the page. Another consideration is the effect that a script can have on a text. If a script can have an effect on the text flow and it doesn't appeal to geometry, then you should really run it at spill end. Several Typefi script modules run at spill end. So, for example, conditional spacing. Conditional spacing changes the space between paragraphs and can therefore change the page layout. Conditional keeps certain paragraphs together, and it too can change the flow of the text. And the Grep module, which applies character styles to certain text found by Grep expressions. And like the others, the Grep module can change the text flow. And all these scripts don't appeal to geometry, so that's why they run at spill end. Page end. At page end, the Typefi engine is done with a page. So all text and all floating and fixed elements have been placed. If there aren't any floats to be placed, a page looks the same at page start and page end. Again, at page end, scripts are used that need to see the text in order to take its measure, so to speak, determine the baseline, for example, and that can change the text flow. Those scripts have to run at page end. Spread end, like spread start, we don't use it, and for the same reason. It's here though for completeness sake. At section end, the Typefi section was finished, and that coincides with an InDesign section. The Typefi in book jobs stores each section as a separate document. So book jobs and single document jobs use the same CXML file. In document jobs, the whole CXML file is written as a single document, and in a book job, the CXML is saved as separate documents. So in certain circumstances, there's a certain amount of overlap between section and document end. A typical use of a section end script is, for example, one that places thumb tabs in the margins of chapters. For example, travel guides and dictionaries and reference works have thumb tabs in the margin so you can easily see where the chapters are, for example. That kind of script is very suitable to run at section end. Index starts. The index markers are always processed at spill end and placed on InDesign's index panel, so that by the time index start occurs, the InDesign's index panel has been populated. I showed it here, for example, in a document. So this is the index panel, as you can see. Here, the index has not been generated. So at index start, this index isn't there yet. Index start scripts, they have the full access to the index panel, and they can be used, for example, to set or change sort order fields, to deal with InDesign's strange way of dealing with page radius, and whatever else can be done at the index panel. At index end, the index was generated and placed, and at index end, you run scripts that need to see the whole generated index. And a typical example would be a script that places repeat topics at the top of a page. Next, document end. At document end, the document is completely finished. So the TOC has been generated and updated, and the index has been created and updated. Everything is done. You must make absolutely sure that that script doesn't change the layout of a page, because you might misalign the TOC and the index, and other placements might be upset when you change the page layout. If you do run a document end script that might change the layout, then you have to script the updating of the TOC and the index yourself. So ideally, scripts that you run at script end are those that don't impact the layout. Examples of those scripts are placement of bars in the margin and shaded backgrounds in text. They don't impact the flow of the text. And other typical document end scripts are those that manipulate the running headers, for example, and they log various types of document diagnostics, missing glyphs, overset text, that sort of thing. At bookend, finally, all book files have been finished, and the table of contents was done or redone and updated. Everything is updated. And bookend is comparable to document end in the sense that you can open a book file and all its chapters, and then you have the bookend event. And again, like a document end script, at bookend, you mustn't change the page layout. Finally, script parameters. You see here, this is not, of course, a script event, but you can use this field to pass all sorts of information to any script. So, for example, you can use any text form to pass on information to scripts, but it's good practice to use JSON notation. It stands for JavaScript Object Notation. For example, spot color red. If a script needs to set a spot color, you enter that in the parameters field, and now any script can make use of this script parameter. Even two or more scripts can use that same script parameter. Those properties, the JSON objects can be, JSON strings can be combined into one string, as you see here. The combination spot color red output prof. That concludes this first episode of the webinar. Thank you very much.